From what I know about beef stroganoff, it appears that it's a very old Russian recipe that was then modernized for a very famous Russian family by French chefs who were working for that family. Sort of a Russian-inspired flavored dish with French technique. Usually it's a sauteed beef with onions and mushrooms and sour cream, but I had it all the time growing up as a kid and it always just fell a little short, a little bit bland, a bit lackluster in my opinion. So today we're gonna update it a bit and cater it a bit more to my personal preferences. Instead of using a sauteed beef, we're gonna use a braised short rib, and we're gonna look for some better quality mushrooms to elevate this recipe. It is one of the ultimate comforting things to eat in the fall this time of year. I wanna thank our sponsor today, Bright Cellars, but more on them later. For now, let's just jump right into it. First things first, roughly chop into like a large dice some of this onion, the carrot, and we're just gonna smash a few cloves of garlic. Now since these vegetables are gonna cook down for a while, we want them a little bit larger than we normally would so that they don't kind of disintegrate during the cooking process. Got some carrots here. I just cut them into chunks in the narrow end, and once it starts to get a little bit thicker, I'll cut that part in half and then try and get roughly equal sized pieces throughout the carrot. And then just give the garlic a rough smash. These are the aromatics that we're gonna use to braise our beef. Now here is our beef. You can go with a chuck roast or any sort of tough cut of meat. I'm going with short rib, boneless short rib. And these are some nice lean pieces. There's lots of intermuscular fat, so what I'm looking for is that lean marbled meat. We wanna just cut this into bite-sized pieces. Now with this beef, I'm just gonna shave off a little bit of this sinew off the top, and then we're gonna cut it into cubes. And we don't want them too big, and we don't want them too small, or else they're gonna fall apart. Just a nice, large, but bite-sized piece is gonna work nicely here. Then just pat them dry, and then we're gonna coat them with some salt before we sear them in the pan. Now for this recipe, we're gonna need a little bit of wine. And whether you like to drink a lot or not drink at all, it's always good to have wine on hand, whether you're entertaining or like today, you're cooking, which is why I wanna thank our sponsor today, Bright Cellar. Bright Cellars is a monthly wine subscription that uses a 7-question quiz to match you with wines from all over the world curated specifically for your palate. You ever walk into a wine or a liquor store and you're just overwhelmed by like 10,000 bottles that just all have different labels and you've never heard of them? Well, Bright Cellars will send those wines directly to you, so you don't need to ever venture out again for wine or pick out wines based on their label alone. Each box comes with a wine education card for each bottle that outlines the tasting notes, suggested pairings, best serving temperature, and the origin. And Bright Cellars offers wines beyond your typical grocery store wine and even offers sustainable varietals and biodynamic wines, like this one I got delivered today. A 2020 Tannat from California called Dead Stars and Black Holes, which is made from sustainable grapes and is a delicious full-bodied red that I'm also gonna need to use a little bit of to make our beef stroganoff. Man, that's good. This is gonna be the perfect wine to cook with. Bright Cellars are so confident you're gonna love their service. They're giving my viewers 50% off for their first 6-bottle box. That's 6 bottles of wine for just $53. That's what I call a deal. So head down onto the description, click the link, and order your first box of Bright Cellars today. So now we've got all of our ingredients. We've got our wine. I'm gonna use about 4 cups of beef stock. I need some tomato paste, some paprika, and a couple tablespoons of all-purpose flour. And I have my oven preheating at 300 degrees. First thing we're gonna do is get a heavy bottomed Dutch oven on the stove on medium to high heat. And we wanna get that nice and hot before we add some oil in and start to sear off the beef in batches. Now this isn't a sirloin or a steak, this is a short rib. We don't have to worry about overcooking it, so we can get a nice sear on one side. Just be patient and let that color develop, and then just go through and give it a nice flip. Let that color develop again on the other side, and then start to get the beef out of the pan and continue cooking them in batches. The more browning you can develop on the meat and in the bottom of the pan, the more flavor the stroganoff's gonna have. And once all the beef is seared, we're gonna add those vegetables directly into the pot on high heat. And we want those juices to kind of pull off some of the brown bits from the bottom of the pan, doing like a pre-deglaze. And we wanna cook them for about 5 minutes until we start to smell some caramelized notes and the vegetables are getting slightly softened, but not yet translucent. And once we see a little bit of that fond developing on the bottom of the pan, I'm gonna add some paprika, maybe a tablespoon or two, get that worked in and toasted. And then I'm gonna add about 2 tablespoons of tomato paste and work that in as well, and that's gonna further help develop the fond on the bottom of the pan, making sure that we do not burn it. And once that fond is nicely developed, we're gonna add about 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, and we're gonna mix it and get that coated and just cook a little bit of the rawness out. And then at this point, that fond is kind of on the borderline and we can now start to deglaze. Just add a cup or 2 of that wine and scrape the bottom of the pan to pick up all of those flavorful brown bits. And then we want to reduce that wine until it's a nice glaze. Now I see a little bit of these brown bits that are not getting picked up, so I'm just going to add a little bit more wine just to loosen it up so all that flavor gets incorporated into the sauce. Then we're gonna add in our broth or our stock. Before I add the beef back to the pan, I'm gonna take a spatula and just sort of scrape off the edges of the pan. Get those into the sauce. Then add the beef, stir it up. Bring it up to a boil. Then place the lid on it and pop that into the oven, and we're gonna let that go for about 3 hours. So that's been cooking for about 2 hours now. I've got about a half an hour left, and at this point I'm gonna start to prep the mushrooms. And this is one of the places where we're trying to elevate it a little bit. Right here I've got some cremini mushrooms. These are easy to find and kind of my go-to. You could use some shiitakes. At my local farmer's market, my mushroom guy at the farmer's market grows these chestnut mushrooms. These are basically a strain of white button mushrooms, but they grow a brown top and there's a better texture and a flavor to them. And whenever I see them, I try and get them. So whatever kind of mushroom you like, you go with, but we need about a pound here. You just want to slice off the tough end of the mushroom. And then for the creminis, these look pretty clean. I don't think I really need to wash them. I just like to take a bit of the woody stem off. And then I just want to quarter them like that. I want a little time to go with those mushrooms, so I'm just gonna pick some of that now. The leaves are pointing upwards. You just pull the opposite way. Give it a rough chop. So now to finish everything off, I'm going in with, this is about a cup or so of sour cream. Then I have a 1/4 cup of heavy cream. I'm gonna pour that in. And then a couple tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. And you just wanna combine that. That's about the consistency you want. Once it's the right consistency, I want it to be like a little bit of an off-white color from that Worcestershire sauce. That's gonna be perfect. And what we're gonna do is then take that hot liquid. When we take that beef out of the oven, it's gonna be too hot for us to pour this directly into it. So we're gonna take a little bit of that liquid and just temper this. Adding the hot liquid to this, slowly starting to match the temperature of the liquid in the pot, and then we can add it all in and finish everything up. And then for the mushrooms, we're just gonna saute them in a little bit of butter and olive oil. After 3 hours of cooking, I'm gonna pull out the pot and give the beef a check. And as we can see, the sauce is thick and nice and creamy, and that beef is fork tender. It's not shredding instantly into the sauce, but if you play with it, the beef will fall apart. And that's kind of exactly the texture I'm looking for. Now we can set that off to the side and start to cook the mushrooms in a pan in butter and olive oil over medium high to high heat. When you cook mushrooms, they first expel their moisture and then start to brown. So high heat is really necessary to evaporate that moisture quickly and get it to the browning process. So leave it alone, let it do its thing, give it a toss every now and then, and when the moisture starts to evaporate, you can add the thyme, season with a little bit of salt, and continue to cook until they're nicely browned all the way through. While those are browning, we want to make sure we get some water up to a boil to cook our egg noodles. And these are good quality egg noodles. They're made with durum wheat and semolina. They kind of have a little texture to them, kind of like a good pasta does. So if you can, look out for those. And I'm just gonna portion out like a single serving because I'm only making this recipe for myself. Then what we can do is temper the sour cream by just ladling in a little bit of that braising liquid into the sour cream mixture and just getting that cream mixture acclimated to the heat. Once it's well incorporated, we can just pour that whole thing into the pot, get it mixed up. Then you're gonna start to see that familiar creamy stroganoff look start to take shape. By now those mushrooms should be nicely browned. We just want to literally toss those into the pot and get those mixed up. Do one final seasoning adjustment and then just keep that simmering on low heat while we finish the noodles. We want to make sure our water is well salted, and then just like pasta, if these egg noodles cook for 9 minutes, I want to cook them for about 7 to 8 minutes and then finish cooking them to al dente in the sauce, just like we would any pasta dish. Once we drain the pasta, we're gonna get a knob of butter into a pan and add those noodles in it and get the noodles tossed in that butter, and then start to add some of the stroganoff sauce and finish cooking for the last minute in the sauce until the noodles are perfectly al dente. Then we can just plate it up in a bowl with a few nice hefty spoonfuls of the stroganoff right on top and a little garnish of some fresh chopped parsley. And as you can see, the sauce is beautifully creamy and the beef is pull apart tender, but will still hold to a fork, which is the ideal texture for me. As always, this recipe is going to be linked down in the description, as well as all other relevant links from this video. So go down and check those out. This is one you're really going to want to try. That's all that I have today. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and go feed yourself. If you're like me and you're craving comfort food right now, I got 4 more videos on the screen. May I suggest these Ricotta meatball sliders? I mean, forget about it.